The metal of the observation deck was cold against Captain Kaelen Rix's palms. Outside the viewport, Viridian 7 spun, a dizzying canvas of emerald continents shrouded in perpetual violet lightning storms. It was beautiful, volatile, and, until 6 days ago, the single greatest discovery of their decade-long mission aboard Astraea Station. Now, it was just the backdrop to an impending catastrophe. "Status report, Lieutenant." Kael's voice was low, clipped, and devoid of the easy warmth he hadn't possessed since the Ares incident 5 years prior. He didn't look at the lieutenant, his gaze fixed on the central bay where the problem resided. "The gravimetric fluctuations are escalating, Captain," Lieutenant Commander Alice reported, her voice taut with strain. "The containment field is holding, but the power draw is exponential. If we don't shunt the core, we risk structural integrity across sectors B and C." The problem was the Shi'ar-K'tar Artifact. It wasn't supposed to do anything. It was an inert, 30,000-year-old obsidian sphere found deep in Viridian 7's crust, inscribed with a language no living species had deciphered, until Dr. Zylara T'Kari arrived. Kael turned, his jaw tight. "Where's the good doctor?" Alice hesitated. "She's been apprehended, Captain." In the brig Sector Gamma, Chief Security Officer Varric filed the report himself. Unauthorized access to the restricted archaeological bay, followed by, well, the activation. Kael felt a slow, familiar burn of rage. He had warned the Council, he had begged them, to keep the Xylosian linguist away from the live dig site. The Xylosians were famed, and feared, for their natural, untrainable psychic and empathic sensitivities. They didn't just read data, they felt it. "Bring her to the auxiliary containment chamber. Secure her there. We need answers, not detention." "This isn't a theft, Alice, it's a crisis, and she's the only one who can translate the damn thing." A few hours later, Dr. Zylara T'Kari was secured in a secondary, pressurized observation cell adjacent to the main artifact chamber. She was tall, with skin the color of twilight and intricate, swirling metallic tattoos tracing the high points of her cheekbones, a common feature of her Xylosian lineage. Her eyes, usually the vivid green of Viridian 7's oceans, were currently dulled by exhaustion and containment. Kael stood on the outside of the transparent shielding, the air between them charged with unspoken accusation. The artifact, a meter-wide sphere of humming black stone, sat across the main bay, pulsating with faint purple light. "Dr. T'Kari," Kael began, his voice flat, "you accessed a restricted archaeological bay without authorization. You touched an ancient alien device, against standing orders, and now that device is threatening to tear a hole in our reality. Explain." Zylara lifted her head, meeting his harsh gaze without flinching. Her voice was surprisingly soft, yet carried an undeniable resonance. "Captain Rix, I did not activate it. I translated a single word, a warning. The language? It's not a syntax. It's a song. A lament. It was calling out, Captain, it was painful." She rose slowly, running a hand over the cool glass wall that separated them. "I am Xylosian. We don't just read data logs, we read emotional frequencies. That sphere is not a weapon. It's a nexus, a key, and it's terrified. You have it contained, but you are not listening, and you have me locked up for trying to stop the scream." Kael scoffed, leaning closer to the glass. "Terror? It's emitting a cascade of unstable, gravitational waves that are already warping space-time in the low-pressure zones. That isn't an emotion, Doctor, that's physics, and you are responsible." The raw tension between them, the pragmatist haunted by failure and the empath persecuted for her unique gifts, was already thicker than the vacuum outside the station's hull. Kael saw a rogue academic. Zylara saw a man drowning in his own carefully constructed emotional silence. He needed her mind. She needed his freedom, and the artifact needed them both. The situation escalated faster than Kael anticipated. The artifact's purple shimmer brightened, causing the entire containment chamber to hum. The security monitors began displaying garbled static. Kael knew he couldn't keep Zylara locked away. He needed her within the chamber, translating in real time. "Alice, open the gate to the auxiliary cell," Kael commanded, his eyes still on the fluctuating energy readings. He watched as Zylara stepped out, stretching her long limbs. Her tailored Xylosian uniform was rumpled, but her demeanor was one of detached observation. She was keenly aware of the power shift. Kael was now reliant on her. "Captain Rix, I recommend powering down the primary containment field," Zylara stated immediately, walking toward the central console. "It's not stabilizing the field, it's arguing with it. The artifact's energy signature is non-electromagnetic. It's cognitive." Kael whirled on her. "Absolutely not. That field is the only thing keeping that thing from turning us all into quantum dust. You will follow procedure, Doctor, or you go back to the brig." "The brig is useless against a reality shift, Captain," she countered calmly, her Xylosian accent softening the edges of her critique. "If I'm going to risk my existence for your science, you will at least listen to my counsel. The containment field generates a repulsive force. The artifact is reacting to it like fear." He hesitated. She wasn't just guessing. Her Xylosian blood gave her a connection he couldn't comprehend. He needed proof, but the gravitational anomalies were spreading. "Fine," he ground out, gesturing to a dedicated console inside the chamber's inner observation ring. "You're restricted to that console. You will translate the symbols, chart its energy output, and offer theories. You do not touch the artifact, and you do not deviate from my orders. I'll be here monitoring your every breath." The forced proximity was immediate. Kael took up position barely 3 meters from her, his hand resting near his sidearm, not in threat, but as a reflex. He could smell the subtle, clean scent of ozone and something akin to sandalwood that clung to her. He was unnerved by how aware he was of her presence. As Zylara began working, inputting the flowing script into the translator matrix, Kael started feeling something strange. It wasn't the usual stress of command. It was a rapid, unwelcome kaleidoscope of sensations. A sudden, sharp memory of cold, empty space. A wave of dizzying fatigue. A fleeting, intense surge of determination. He rubbed his temples, attributing it to fatigue. Zylara noticed. She glanced up, her green eyes narrowed in assessment. "Captain, your anxiety is quite loud. Are you feeling well?" "My anxiety is my own business, Doctor," he snapped, his voice sharp. "Focus on the translation." She sighed. A soft, weary sound. "It's difficult to focus when your internal distress signals are flooding my sensory field. The artifact is amplifying localized psychic energy, Captain. That's why it was calling out. It's an antenna. Every single person on this station, every latent worry, every suppressed fear, it's all feeding the device. And right now, Captain Rix, your walls are crumbling. I'm picking up loneliness and deep guilt." Kael's blood ran cold. Guilt. The Ares incident. He never spoke of it. No one in the current crew knew the specifics of his mission failure. "That's enough, T'Kari. You are bordering on insubordination. I'm stating a scientific fact. Your suppressed grief is a power source to the Shi'ar-K'tar. Containment is futile. We must connect with it, not repel it." The tension was suffocating. Kael felt violated, exposed by this alien woman who could read his soul with the same ease he could read a sensor display. He despised her for her intrusion, yet the sheer, terrifying accuracy of her assessment was starting to break through his rigid control. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting the room in emergency red. The console Kael was leaning on flashed a dire warning: containment field integrity, 10%. A deep, resonating thrum echoed from the artifact. The purple light intensified, and the floor vibrated violently. The non-romantic conflict was about to intersect brutally with their forced proximity. The sudden, violent shudder that rocked the entire station wasn't a physics anomaly. It was an act of war. "What was that?" Kael roared, steadying himself on the console. Alice's voice crackled through the comms, panicked and distorted. "Captain, we've been boarded." "No, wait, it's not external, it's internal. Varek. Chief Security Officer Varek has taken the bridge. He's locked down all key sectors, claiming an emergency military takeover to secure the artifact. He says your containment protocols are insufficient. The coup was immediate, brutal, and targeted." Kael had underestimated Varek's ambition and his ties to the military faction of the Council, who wanted the Shi'ar-K'tar Artifact weaponized, not studied. "Seal the containment chamber. Level 5 lockdown. Override Varek's security." "Matrix, Alice, now!" Kael ordered, simultaneously drawing his sidearm. "Can't, Captain." He anticipated it. "The comms are degrading. They're shunting power from the comm array to the primary weapon systems. We're isolated. I'm moving to auxiliary command, but I might lose you. The comms went dead, replaced by the grating sound of station alarms. Kael was trapped. And worse, he was trapped with the one person who challenged his authority and invaded his privacy. He turned to Zylara, his face grim. It's Varric. He wants the artifact. He doesn't care about the consequences. He just sees a weapon. We have to move this thing now. Zylara didn't flinch at the sight of his drawn weapon. She was already working on her own console, her fingers flying over the Xylosian script. He won't get it, Captain. If he tries to power it up further, he won't get a weapon. He'll get a supernova. The artifact is not stabilizing, it's reaching. And every time Varric's men try to override a lock, they are feeding its anxiety, which manifests as energy spikes. She pointed to a newly translated line of script on her display. The warning says, "Do not attempt to sever. You must guide. Only the joined consciousness may temper the star heart." Joined consciousness? Kael scoffed, holstering his weapon. That's New Age nonsense, Doctor. We need physics, not philosophy. It's Xylosian physics, Captain. The artifact is keyed to empathic resonance. If we can't stop Varric, we have to move the artifact to the emergency core dump, the deepest point of the station where the containment field is organic, not electronic. It's the only place it might be stabilized. Kael stared at her, assessing the risk. Moving the artifact meant transporting a highly unstable gravitational device through hostile, locked-down sectors. It was suicide. But Varric was moments away. From breaching the outer containment chamber doors, the sound of heavy cutting lasers was already audible. There's a maintenance access hatch beneath this floor, leading to the Sector Delta sub-level conduits, Kael said, running to a panel. It's small. Too small for the artifact. Not if we create a momentary gravity siphon, Zylara countered, her eyes flashing with sudden intensity. I can use the artifact's own field to momentarily reduce its mass and stabilize it long enough for us to guide it into the conduit. But I need to be touching it to do so, and you'll need to override the physical locks manually, down in the conduits. Kael's gut screamed in protest. Putting his life in the hands of the psychic alien who had already invaded his deepest thoughts was a reckless gamble. But the lasers were getting closer. Do it, Doctor. And if you betray me, I will shoot you myself. Then perhaps you should stop focusing on my betrayal, Captain, and focus on your survival. Your fear is making the field unstable. She met his eyes, a challenge and an invitation in her intense gaze. The game had changed. They were no longer captor and captive, but forced co-conspirators in a desperate, last-ditch effort. The maintenance conduit was a nightmare of rusted metal, exposed wiring, and dripping condensation. Kael, leading the way, felt the oppressive weight of the station above them, its structural groans amplified in the narrow space. The artifact floated silently behind them, guided by Zylara. She walked backward, her hands extended, palms facing the obsidian sphere. She was concentrating intensely, a faint sheen of sweat on her brow, her rhythmic breathing the only sound besides Kael's boots on the metal rungs. How are you doing? That? Kael whispered, checking an old security panel for Varric's troops. I am not moving it, Captain. I am persuading it, Zylara replied, her voice strained. I am giving it a focus for its anxious energy, a trajectory. The raw emotion of being contained, of being feared, is a destructive feedback loop. I am replacing that feedback with an image of safety, the emergency core dump. It's accepting the guidance. For now. Kael felt a sudden, searing spike of headache. It felt like an electric current running behind his eyes. He stopped, grabbing the wall for support. What's wrong? Zylara asked, immediately breaking her concentration. The artifact wobbled precariously. Nothing. Keep moving. Just a pulse from the station's power grid, I assume. No, Zylara breathed, her eyes now wide with alarm. It's not the grid. It's you. When I focused on stabilizing the artifact, I used your presence, your inherent rigid need for control, as an anchor for the field. But I'm pulling too deep. I'm drawing on his trauma. Kael knew exactly who he was. Commander? Elias Vance. The last man to die on the Ares. Stop it. Stop invading my mind, Doctor, or I swear I will end this right here. His voice was low and menacing, but fear was laced within the threat. Zylara looked genuinely remorseful. It's not deliberate, Kael. The psychic amplification is intense down here, insulated by the bedrock of the station. Your emotional signature is too powerful, too raw. I can't filter it. I am feeling your loss like it's my own, Captain. The icy cold of the vacuum, the sudden silence, the sight of his faceplate cracking. Kael slammed his hand against the wall. The sound echoed. Painfully. I said enough. You hate me, she whispered, her green eyes shimmering with unshed tears, not hers, but the empathic echo of his own suppressed pain. You hate me because I can see the real Captain Kael Rix, the broken man underneath the uniform who blames himself for every molecule lost. You see me as a threat because I can dismantle your carefully constructed walls without a tool. She took a slow, deliberate step towards him, closing the 3-meter gap. The artifact pulsed violently behind her, reacting to their emotional collision. We are bound now, Captain, she said, her voice dropping to a hypnotic register. Physically, by this tunnel. Emotionally, by the artifact's demands. It requires a unified intention, not conflict. We cannot move until you lower your shield, just slightly. Trust me with the truth, and I can stabilize the gravity field. Kael stood rigid, paralyzed by a decade of self-imposed solitude warring with the immediate, visceral need for survival. He needed her to be focused, and his suppressed trauma was actively jeopardizing the mission. Vance was my friend. He ground out, the words tasting like rust and ash. My shield generator failed. I hesitated for 3 seconds before initiating the emergency purge. 3 seconds. That's how long it took for the hull breach to take him. He looked away, unable to bear the weight of her empathic gaze. Now, are you stable, Doctor? Xylara's face softened. The intense empathy in her eyes seemed to settle the frantic energy around the artifact. Yes, Captain. Now we are. She turned back, and the artifact, as if recognizing the sincerity of the admission, stabilized its energy flow. The crisis was averted, but the barrier between them had been irrevocably weakened. They were partners now, forged in a mutual vulnerability Kael had sworn never to allow. The Deep Space Research Station's central maintenance network was an ancient, sprawling maze, the belly of the beast. Kael and Zylara navigated by dead reckoning and Kael's intimate knowledge of the structure's weaknesses. They were heading deeper into the station's gravity dampeners, the least structurally sound but most energetically isolated area. They paused in a large circular chamber where massive conduit pipes intersected, a temporary acoustic shield against Varric's search parties. Zylara let the artifact hover gently in the center. We have maybe 10 minutes before Varric realizes we bypassed his level 5 lockdown and start sending drones into the sublevels, Kael said, pulling out a battered datapad to recalibrate the route. Zylara, exhausted from maintaining the psychic link to the artifact, sank down against a cold pipe. The drain of managing the device's anxiety was enormous. I need to rest for a moment. The energy required to keep its core focused is immense, she murmured. Kael watched her, still standing, his posture radiating tension. He felt the residual tremor of her empathy from the previous confrontation, and the unfamiliar sensation of having his burden shared, however briefly, was unsettling. You said you felt cold. On the Ares, Kael said abruptly, his eyes on the datapad, unable to look at her. Zylara shifted. Yes, the psychic signature of a catastrophic hull breach is uniquely terrifying. It's not just the sudden vacuum. It's the abrupt, absolute silence of the mind, and the overwhelming, desperate coldness of space. It's why I wear this uniform, Kael admitted, running a hand over the starched collar of his commander's jacket. It's why I keep everything regulated. I can't stand the cold anymore, physical or emotional. I understand, Zylara replied, her voice gentle. You built your command post as a cage against feeling, against the guilt. You believe that if you regulate the external chaos, you can somehow regulate the internal chaos. And you think you can fix me with some Xylosian hand-waving? He challenged, suddenly defensive. I don't think you're broken, Captain. she said, meeting his gaze. I think you're deeply wounded, and you mistake your scars for character flaws. Your capacity for self-blame is so enormous that it's actually a terrible source of power, the ultimate control mechanism. That's what the artifact latched onto. It's a mirror of intense emotional states. You showed it vulnerability, and it settled. That's why we need to trust each other, Kael. She used his first name for the first time, and the casual intimacy of it hit him like a physical blow. It broke through the formality he desperately relied on. He knelt beside her, checking her pulse, a pretext for physical contact. Her skin was cool, and her hand, as he released it, lingered for a fraction of a second against his. I need a comprehensive theory, Doctor. If this star heart is an antenna, what is it transmitting, and what is it receiving? Zylara leaned her head back against the pipe, closing her eyes. It's transmitting an SOS, an ancient call for help. The Shi'ar-K'tar were not soldiers. They were navigators. They built this device to open a passage through space-time to escape a catastrophic event, but they didn't want to go alone. They keyed it to the strongest emotional signature available, a guiding light. In our case, the signature of this station's collective anxiety, Varick's greed, your guilt, the general fear of the mission's failure, is creating a Chihuahua vortex of instability. So, Varick powers it up, the station gets destroyed, and what happens next? Kael pressed. The artifact tears a localized, catastrophic fold in space-time and drags everything, the station, Viridian 7, and anything within a 5 million kilometer radius, into a random, unknown quadrant of the galaxy, Zylara explained, her voice quiet but firm. The political coup is merely the fuse. The artifact is the bomb. Kael absorbed the chilling explanation. Political ambition fueled by fear, leading to cosmic disaster. He looked at the hovering obsidian sphere and then back at Zylara. She was the expert, the sensitive instrument, and the only path forward. He had to stop fighting his feelings, not for her, but for the sake of the mission. The initial hatred was melting, replaced by a deep grudging respect, and something much more dangerous: recognition. They moved again, deeper into the dark, echoing network of the station's underbelly. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic hum of the artifact and their own labored breathing. They reached a small, pressurized maintenance pod, a rarely used emergency staging area, and settled in for a critical system override. Kael worked on the physical console, manually patching the station's old environmental controls to give them access to the core dump sector, which Varick had sealed off. Zylara, meanwhile, used the momentary respite to stabilize her link to the artifact. I need to tell you about the Xylosian gift, Kael, Zylara said, using his name again, now with an air of necessity rather than intimacy. It's why I was so against the military using our people for intel. It's not just feeling, it's imprinting. When two consciousnesses are in extreme proximity under high-stress fields, they can imprint on each other. Their emotional and memory blueprints become temporarily superimposed. Kael stopped typing, his fingers hovering over the ancient, dust-coated keyboard. Imprinting? Yes. You felt my exhaustion. I felt your grief. We are, at this moment, wearing each other's emotional scars. It's why you despise me. I saw you at your weakest, and you saw me at my most vulnerable, fearing the artifact's power. And what happens when the stress is gone? When the artifact is stabilized? He asked, a knot forming in his stomach. Zylara turned to him, her face serious. The imprinting fades, but not completely. The experience, the knowledge of the other's core being, remains. It's a terrifying, binding intimacy. It is, in fact, how Xylosians identify fated mates, if such a concept were to cross species boundaries. Kael turned back to the console, trying to bury the heat rising in his face. Well, good thing we're not Xylosian, Doctor. We're just two colleagues trying to prevent galactic catastrophe. Focus on the core dump access codes. The attempt to retreat into professionalism failed. Zylara simply waited patiently, her presence a silent challenge. After a moment of frustrating silence, Kael sighed, defeated. He needed to clear the air to clear his head. He pulled up an old schematic of the Ares mission and magnified a blurry photo of a 4-man crew. They called the Ares mission the Ghost Run. Reconnaissance into the Kuiper Belt. Vance, commander, Harper, pilot, and Miller, systems specialist, Kael recounted, his voice flat but strained. I was the tactical officer. Vance was my best friend. When the micrometeoroid hit, the damage was localized but severe. Vance was caught in the breach, his helmet compromised. I had the code to initiate the emergency section purge. It was instantaneous, designed to save the other 3 sections. He paused, licking his dry lips. I saw him through the viewport. He was signaling. A final message. I thought he was telling me the breach was contained. So I waited. I didn't initiate the purge. 3 seconds later, the hull buckled, the radiation poured in, and Vance died. Harper and Miller died a day. Later from exposure because I waited 3 seconds. I tried to save 1 life and killed 3. He slammed the data pad down. That's my secret, Doctor. That's the guilt you've been feeding off of. My 1 failing led to 4 deaths, and I wear this command like a hair shirt every day. Zylara didn't offer empty reassurances. She simply walked over, her shadow falling over him. She didn't touch him. But she projected a wave of calming, pure empathy that washed over his fractured mind. It's not guilt, Kael. It's love. The failure to purge wasn't hesitation. It was a desperate, unconscious, 3-second attempt to save your friend. It was compassion overriding protocol. And that capacity for profound compassion is what we need now, not your self-imposed isolation. The artifact needs to feel that compassion. It needs a stable, emotional anchor keyed to saving, not destroying. He looked up at her, and for the first time he saw not the irritating alien with psychic powers, but a woman who understood his deepest wound better than he understood it himself. He reached out, not consciously, and grasped her hand. The connection was instantaneous, a surge of electric warmth that stabilized his mind and, judging by the artifact's suddenly gentle hum, stabilized the field around them. Kael finally secured the codes, granting them passage into the core dump sector, a massive cylindrical silo designed to jettison toxic waste and highly unstable materials into space. As they approached the final access hatch, a loud clank echoed. From the conduit behind them. They've found us, Kael muttered, drawing his weapon. Varric has tracked the gravimetric signature fluctuations. Get ready, Zylara. Varric's voice, amplified and distorted, echoed from the other side of the hatch. Captain Rix, stand down! You are committing treason by withholding a military asset. Surrender the artifact now, and you will face court-martial, not execution. You're attempting a political coup that will destroy this station and everyone on it, Varric. You call that military efficiency? Kael yelled back. The Xylosian witch has corrupted your judgment, Rix. That device is the key to faster-than-light travel, a game-changer. You are sacrificing our future for a superstition. He won't listen, Zylara whispered, her hand instinctively tightening on Kael's. His mind is a torrent of pure, unadulterated ambition. It's blinding him to logic. We need a distraction. I have an idea. A psychic flash to scramble his brain? Kael asked wryly. No. A diplomat's gambit, she corrected. I need you to open the hatch just enough for me to see Varric. I can communicate with him, not through words, but through the artifact. I can project the reality of his ambition. Kael hesitated. That sounds like a massive risk. If he fires, you're exposed. It's the only way to stop the feedback loop. I need to replace his greed with a stable, overwhelming image of his own death, the absolute silence and coldness of the vacuum that awaits him if he fails. It will terrify the artifact into a momentary pause, allowing us to slip through. He nodded, trusting her completely now. The woman who invaded his mind was also the woman who anchored his soul. Kael used the console to partially retract the heavy, pressurized hatch, just a meter high. On the other side stood Varric, flanked by 2 security officers, all armed with disruptor rifles. Stop right there, Captain, Varric shouted. Zylara stepped into the narrow gap, the artifact floating ominously behind her. She didn't speak, didn't raise her hands. She simply met Varric's gaze, channeled the artifact's power and projected. Kael watched Varric's face contort. The chief security officer's eyes glazed over, his rifle dropping slightly. For 3 terrifying seconds, Varric was still, frozen in a vision of his own making. The artifact, in response, emitted a high-pitched, resonant whine, a sound of sudden, violent terror. "Now, Kael!" Zylara screamed, collapsing against the hatch frame, the psychic strain almost breaking her. Kael slammed the override, and the hatch hissed shut, sealing them inside the core dump sector. They were safe from Varric, but the artifact was wildly unstable. The core dump sector was vast, cold, and dimly lit, a perfect, acoustically isolated chamber, but functionally empty. It was their final destination, a place where the station's gravitational signature was minimal. The artifact, however, was in crisis. Xylara's powerful negative projection to Varric had overstimulated the device. It was spinning rapidly, emitting waves of purple energy that visibly distorted the air around them. Structural elements in the chamber began to bend and buckle under the chaotic gravitational stress. "It's overloading! It's going critical!" Kael yelled, rushing to the main core dump console. "I need to jettison it, now!" "No!" Zylara cried, scrambling to her feet, though she was clearly near collapse. "Jettisoning it will only detonate it in open space. We'll be hit by the shockwave. It needs to be stabilized here, Kael. I need to give it a focus of absolute, pure stability, a counterbalance to Varric's ambition and my own fear." She staggered toward the artifact, which was oscillating violently. "Don't touch it. The energy is too raw," Kael warned. But Zylara was already there, placing both hands flat against the humming obsidian surface. She closed her eyes, and Kael watched, horrified, as the metallic tattoos on her face began to glow with the same purple light as the artifact. "It's too much. I can't filter it," Zylara choked out, her body arching in pain. "Kael, I need your anchor, your steady focus. Give me your emotion, your control." Kael knew what she was asking, an even deeper level of imprinting, a full and total merger of their emotional states under a cataclysmic field. It was the only chance they had. He dropped his weapon, ran to her side, and placed his hands over hers, pressing them firmly against the ancient thrumming stone. "Stability," Kael commanded, focusing every atom of his being, every moment of his disciplined life, on the single concept of control. He pushed the image of his rigid, ordered command deck, the steady pulse of the station's life support, and the absolute certainty of his mission. Zylara opened her eyes, meeting his with a desperate intensity. She wasn't just feeling his control. She was drawing his very essence into her mind. He felt her. Not just the exhaustion and the empathy, but the core of her Xylosian being. A profound, ancient loneliness, a species yearning for connection, and a pure, unyielding dedication to knowledge and life. The boundaries between them dissolved completely. His guilt became her compassion. Her weariness became his resolve. Then she shifted the command. "No, Kael. Control is a wall. It needs a purpose. It needs love." "I can't," he gasped, resisting. He hadn't loved anyone since Vance. "Yes, you can. You love your crew, your duty, and the future of this mission. Focus that love, Kael. Focus on me. On this moment, anchor the artifact to the absolute certainty that we will survive this, together." He looked into her vivid green eyes, now amplified by the artifact's light, and saw himself reflected back. Not the cold commander, but the passionate, wounded man he had buried. The love, the desperate, protective, primal love he had once felt for his lost crew, surged back, now channeled entirely through his connection to Zylara. He leaned in, his control shattered, and kissed her. It wasn't a gentle, romantic kiss, but a desperate, life-saving act, a fusion of intent. The energy surged between them, a bolt of pure, white-hot psychic connection. The artifact, bathed in this new, overwhelming emotional signature of protective love and unified purpose, slowly, almost reverently, ceased its spinning. The purple light faded. The hum died down. Silence. Absolute, profound silence. The Shi'ar-K'tar Artifact sat inert, stabilized, its power now dormant. Kael and Zylara stood panting in the sudden silence, their hands still intertwined on the cold surface of the dormant artifact. Their kiss had been a function of physics, but the lingering tenderness, the way his thumb was tracing the ridge of her hand, was all romance. The shared terror had cemented the imprinting, creating a bond deeper and more complex than any human relationship. "I think," Zylara whispered, her voice husky, "we just stabilized an interdimensional star key with a kiss." Kael chuckled, a low, genuine sound that felt alien and wonderful. He didn't release her hand. "I think you just exposed my soul to the galaxy, Doctor, and somehow I don't mind." "Good, because I felt every second of your isolation. You need to stop punishing yourself, Kael." He nodded, the shame finally replaced by resolve. "Later. We have a station to reclaim." The stabilization of the artifact caused a major, system-wide power dip, the perfect cover. Kael used the core dump console to reroute emergency power, re-establishing a comm link to Alice in auxiliary command. "Alice, report!" Alice's voice, clear now, was flooded with relief. "Captain, we thought you were dead. Varric's men are spread too thin." The power surge knocked out their primary sensor net. They're disorganized, falling back to the bridge. "He's cornered himself," Kael stated, already formulating the final attack plan. He turned to Zylara. "Varric tried to weaponize the artifact's instability. We're going to use its stability against him." Using Zylara's understanding of the artifact's latent energy and Kael's tactical knowledge, they developed a plan. Kael, along with Alice and the few loyal crew members, would stage a direct assault on the bridge. Meanwhile, Zylara would position the now stable artifact outside the bridge's viewport. "I can't reactivate it, but I can use its presence to project a residual focused wave of what we shared. Absolute, unified resolve. It will confuse Varric's men, who are steeped in fear and suspicion. It will break their focus," Zylara explained. "A psychological attack," Kael confirmed, a rare smile touching his lips. "I like it." The battle for the bridge was swift and precise. As Kael's small team stormed the main access, Zylara was in position. She focused, using the powerful residual connection to Kael to project their combined willpower, the image of command, loyalty, and partnership. Varric's men, sensing the overwhelming shift in the station's psychic signature, the sudden, powerful presence of a unified, loving command, hesitated. They dropped their weapons, confused and momentarily disarmed by a force they could not comprehend. Kael found Varric on the bridge, slumped over the main console, still paralyzed by the vision Zylara had given him in the conduit. "It's over." "Varric," Kael said, his voice calm and authoritative. "You failed because you focused on destruction. The Shi'ar-K'tar only answers to a unified light." In the weeks that followed, the political debris of the coup was cleared. Varric and his faction were contained, awaiting transport back to the Central Corporate Council for trial. The Astraea Station was scarred but whole, and Viridian 7 continued to orbit, its lightning storms now seeming less threatening. Kael and Zylara were inseparable. The imprinting had faded from the painful, constant echo of trauma into a deep, unshakable foundation of intimacy. They still maintained their separate quarters, but they worked side by side, ate together, and shared an intellectual and emotional connection Kael had never imagined possible. Kael sat in his newly reinstated chair on the bridge, watching Zylara supervise the permanent installation of the artifact in a newly designated bioempathic containment bay, one designed around Xylosian principles. "The Council is calling you the Stabilizer, Doctor," Kael commented, smiling as she joined him. "And they're calling you the Empathic Commander, Captain," Zylara retorted, her green eyes sparkling. "Your reputation for ruthless pragmatism is ruined. You're too soft now." "I'm better, Zylara. You healed the wound I thought was a core part of my identity. You taught me that control isn't silence, it's balance." The political structure of Astraea had shifted. Kael was officially the station commander, but he insisted the position of chief xenolinguist and strategic empath be created for Zylara. It was, in effect, a dual command. No major decision was made without the input of the Xylosian. Later that evening, in Kael's private quarters, the formality of the day stripped away. The last emotional walls between them finally collapsed. Zylara was tracing the outline of Kael's jaw, her touch sending shivers down his spine. "The imprinting is permanent, Kael. Not the pain, but the memory of our connection. When I look at you, I still feel the core of that desperate love you had for Vance and the determination you used to save us all. It's a terrifying thing, to know someone so completely. It's the only thing that makes sense to me anymore, Kael admitted, pulling her closer. My life was a sequence of protocols and failures. Now it's just you. You are the only person who has ever seen me clearly and still chose to stay. I fought you because I was afraid of the truth you held. Now I realize that truth, that deep, fated connection, is my purpose. He looked into her eyes. The man who once lived in fear of coldness, now basking in the profound electric warmth of her gaze. The artifact's function was to open a gate to a new future, a new world, Kael murmured. I think, Zylara, it just opened a gate to ours. Zylara leaned in, resting her forehead against his. It found its nexus, Kael, and so did we. Their relationship, born from hatred and fear, cemented by crisis and the bizarre demands of an alien artifact, had become the ultimate expression of the sci-fi romance trope. Fated mates, not by prophecy, but by physics. They were bound, not by chains, but by the irrefutable gravitational pull of two souls who had merged at the core. Outside the viewport, Viridian 7 spun, still violent, still beautiful. But now, Kael and Zylara faced its unknown future as one dual command, the pragmatic soldier finally balanced by the passionate empath, ready to navigate the vast cold space of the galaxy together. Their story had ended the political coup, saved the station, and, most importantly, saved each other. The Nexus of Stars was stable, and their new life was just beginning.